Hey everybody, it's Michelle here. I wanted to pop on and let you know that I've decided to start a mini series of videos, all centered around increasing student engagement in our classrooms and in learning in our classrooms. One thing that I've noticed from teachers in conversations with teachers or from observations in class is that teachers are wondering, are students actually engaged in learning? And our new teaching context right now has made that very difficult because kids are so far apart if they are in the classroom, and if they're not in the classroom, they're online on a screen, and it's just really difficult to measure and gauge student engagement in lessons in our current teaching context. So I decided I'm going to start this new video series. It's going to be super quick videos. This one might be a little longer, but the others will be super short. And it's all focused on increasing student engagement with our students. Phil Schlechte, who is a new name to me, but I'm actually excited to read some of his research on student engagement. He says that students or people who are authentically engaged in learning would say something like, I would keep doing this if I could. So if I didn't have to go to recess, I would keep doing this. If I didn't have to go home, I would keep doing this. That's the kind of thing we want our students to be saying about the things that they're doing in school. Phil actually has 5 levels of engagement, and for our purposes in Richland and for my videos, I'm going to chunk them into 3 different levels, and you'll see why in a minute. The first level is authentic engagement. So that true engagement has high attention and the students are highly committed to the learning that they're doing. Now, a student who is authentically engaged is driven to complete a project or to learn something new because of something inside them that is loving and wanting to pursue that. There's some kind of value that they find in the learning itself or in the production of whatever they're working on. These students, because they are so driven, will overcome no matter anything. They'll overcome all kinds of difficult barriers because there's something in them that's driving them to learn that material. The next group we're going to call compliance. So these are students who are compliant. They will probably do everything that you tell them to do as a teacher. They're your students that'll be, they might be off task for a second, but you might say, hey, what are you working on? And they'll get straight back to work. These are your compliant students. Now, for these students, there's 2 different reasons why they're being compliant. The first are our strategic compliance students. And these students are highly driven by the extrinsic motivation. So they're working for a grade. They're working for a sticker on a sticker chart. They are working for positive attention from their teacher or from their parent. So those students are highly driven and they're attending to the learning, but they're not really buying into the actual learning itself. There's a different motivation for them completing that task. And then our ritual compliance students, these are students who are following the directions because they don't want to get in trouble. So if they hear the teacher say, raise your hand if, they'll raise their hand no matter what, because the teacher said raise their hand. They're being ritually compliant, but they're not really engaging in the learning. They're just complying with teacher demands or teacher requests so that they don't get into trouble. In both of these compliance situations, the students may learn material for short periods of time, but because there's no real meaning behind what they're learning or real purpose for what they're learning, they aren't going to remember it for a long period of time. They will not retain that learning. The last group of students are the students that are not engaged in learning at all. Now, we have 2 reasons again for them not being engaged in learning. The first is a retreatism. So the students who are retreating from the learning are your ones that are sitting at the back of the carpet and not really, they never raise their hand. If you ask them to answer a question, they'll say, I don't know, or they'll prefer not to answer. These are your students that you really need to be concerned about because they're not engaging in the learning at all. and they're quiet. So sometimes they get overlooked. The second group of students who are not engaged in learning are our rebellious kids. You all know who these are. These are the ones who are avoiding any kind of work because they just don't want to do it. And a lot of times these students are rallying their friends to avoid the work. And in both of those situations, retreatism and rebellion, they're not learning the material. So there's no purpose for the learning, and there's no purpose. They don't really want to follow your directions anyway. So there's a double reason and a double barrier to the actual learning that takes place. So for our purposes, I've kind of chunked these into 3 different sections: authentic engagement, and then we have compliance, and it can be strategic or ritual compliance, and then our groups of students that are not engaged. So here's what I would like to challenge you to do this week. Sometime during a lesson, any lesson, it could be during a read aloud, it could be during a mini lesson, it could be during work time. I want you to stop the lesson, pause for a second, and do a quick survey of the classroom and estimate what percentage of your students fall into each of these categories. It's just an interesting exercise to kind of gauge engagement in the middle of a lesson at a random point in time, and just make some observations about what's happening. If you notice that the same people are not engaged in learning over and over, is there a way we can structure our instruction to try and give them some intrinsic motivation so that they're kind of buying into the lesson that you're doing? So all of those things will come after, but I really just want to challenge you this week to pause during a lesson, take a survey, jot down on a sticky note or something the percentages of students that you think are in each of these categories. And then maybe 3 days later, stop again, take another survey, and just kind of look at what's happening. And if this is something that you end up doing, I would love to hear about it. I love to talk about student learning and student engagement. So if you could send me an email, just let me know what you saw, what you noticed, what was going on at the time. And if you'd like to have conversations about how to increase that student engagement, I would love to have conversations about that. Like I said earlier in the video, this is the first in a series of videos where I'm going to try and unpack student engagement a little bit and offer some real strategies or real ideas for things that you can do to try and increase student engagement overall in your classroom. So be looking for those videos. And again, email me if you have a chance to do this little survey thing of your classroom. I would love to hear what's happening in your class. So thank you for watching today, and I hope you have an excellent week.